1. The Flaming Ghost Ship of Prince Edward Island. The residents of Prince Edward Island are no strangers to ghost stories. The small Atlantic province is perfect for tales of phantom ships with their rocky shores and unpredictable waters. There is something about pastoral communities, especially islands, a cynical streak that breeds storytelling. The stories can be peaceful or supernatural and eerie. The histories of these coastal towns are full of amazing urban legends and superstition that meld together with fact to become accepted truth. Many yarns are woven through Prince Edward Island's urban legends. It's hard to distinguish the best one. However, if it is the best, it's up to you to decide. Regardless, the lore of the flaming ship is undoubtedly a favorite. Since 1786, people have been reporting sightings of a schooner on Northumberland Strait with its 3 or 4 masts ablaze. It has appeared in novels, newspapers, songs, and on a stamp by Canada's post office as part of a series dedicated to famous Canadian ghost stories. Perhaps the best-known narrative is from the 1900s when a group of sailors in Charlottetown saw a ship on the horizon with white sails. The onlookers witnessed the crew climbing up the mast, trying to escape the flames. The sailors jumped into the rowboat and oared out as quickly as they could to rescue the ship's crew, but as they neared, the boat vanished. Residents of Glengarry have similar stories. In the 1950s, a man and his wife were prepping for bed when his wife pointed out the window and asked her husband whose house was the one with the lights on. But there were no houses in that direction, and she was pointing at the water. When the two went out to investigate, they saw a fully rigged ship sailing down the Northumberland Strait at full tilt and completely engulfed in flames. They watched until it disappeared from view, or at least that's what they told Edward D. Ives, an American folklorist from Maine University. A fisherman from Camp Bellington told Ives that he saw a ship when he was out fishing one night, and though he had tried to approach the boat, it never got any closer. Legend says that the ship is blown in on a northeastern wind and is an omen that a storm is coming, but there is very little written and absolutely no consensus over the story that started it all. Ronald H. Sherwood, one of the first people to put the legend to paper in his 1948 book Story Parade, offers some whisperings he heard about the ship's origin. It was a pleasure craft that caught fire after a lamp was upturned during a drunken brawl. Another account was that it was an immigrant ship bound for Quebec that was blown off course and struck by lightning. And yet another account says it's the remains of another ship that went missing after it left port, either Scotland or Shippagan Island, depending on what version you hear. One of Ives' informants offered a theory that pirates set fire to a religious boat carrying nuns and priests. But he prefers to connect the dots between real-life ships, mutinies along the coast, and other fire ship sightings. People still report seeing a flaming vessel. In 2008, a Nova Scotian paper published an account of a teenage boy who saw a white and gold ship in Tamaguchi. The Northumberland Strait separates the island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Each province has its own account of a burning boat. There is also debate over whether the crew members were running around on deck, and sightings differ on the number of masts, the kind of rigging, and the type of ship. One account even suggests it was a steamer, but one has to wonder if that was another ghost ship altogether. After all, the coastline of Canada is littered with them. The story continues to be a point of fascination despite being debunked. In 1905, William Francis Genog chalked up the ship to St. Elmo's fire, a glow that occurs from the atmospheric electricity. Like the legend, there is no universally accepted explanation for what people saw. Some people think it's a crescent moon setting on the horizon or a mirage. But does that really matter? Ghost ships are now part of maritime history, and they make for a great story around a campfire. 2. The Old Hag of Newfoundland. Urban legends can be tricky because there's no way to guarantee the facts. By nature, the stories operate in the shadows, feeding off misinformation, rumors, and fugitive glances. Therefore, it's rare to find an urban legend so thoroughly examined and explained by science. The people of Newfoundland call her the Old Hag, but scientists call it sleep paralysis. These names can cause their own level of fear. We can all agree that the feeling of terror that comes from waking up to find her crouched on your chest and leering over you in the darkness is second to none. Newfoundland is home to many legends and fairy tales that connect to Celtic veins. Many of them are whimsical and beautiful, like the will-o-wisp. This one is sinister and spoken in hushed tones, even by people who don't believe in ghost stories. It is undeniably strange that so many people in one geographical region report identical experiences. Starting in the 1890s, when a small piece mentioning the hag in Newfoundland appeared in the Journal of American Folklore. At this point, the world became aware of a strong belief in superstition had taken root. Over the years, the Memorial University of Newfoundland Folklore and Language Archive has collected people's accounts of their experiences with the hag and ways to rid themselves of her. David J. Hufford, an employee of MUFLA from 1971 to 1974, wrote a book dedicated to his research around the hag. She is described as a witch-like withered old woman with long hair. She can appear in doorways, be next to the bed, or even crawl on top of people, sitting on their chests and pinning them down. The legend is so pervasive that locals use her name as a verb to describe their experience. Hufford reports that people thought they could summon the hag by reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards. They thought they could kill her by sleeping on their backs with knives on boards with upright nails against their chests, designed to stab her when she sat on them. One victim of the hag even accused another person in the community of hagging him, summoning the hag to haunt a third party out of jealousy. Contemporary Newfoundland folklorist David Jarvis confirms that people still believe in the old hag today and approach the legend differently than others. He is a big fan of ghost stories and asks locals about their encounters. Most say no. He always asks, "Have you heard of the old hag?" People with no belief in the supernatural would respond with, "Oh yes, my son had an experience," and proceed to tell them a very creepy story. For the people of Newfoundland, the hag exists outside the realm of fairies and goblins. It is real and present danger that people experience. This may be because it is a scientifically acknowledged problem that affects about 8% of the general population. Sleeping paralysis is a horrible combination of hallucination and lack of muscle control caused by entering REM sleep too quickly. During sleep paralysis, the body and muscles are in REM sleep, but the mind is partially conscious, which can cause waking nightmares. Scientists believe it is a fear response and the brain is trying to make sense of the immobilization that conjures the image of the witches or the presence in the room. They cannot explain why everyone sees the same thing, though. What do you think? Is it an old hag, or is it sleep paralysis? Let us know. And while I've got you here, please help the channel out by hitting the subscribe button and the thumbs up. We realize that 90% of our listeners aren't subscribed. 3. Quebec's date with the devil. Quebec is one of Canada's most historically and culturally rich provinces and has a multitude of folklore and urban legends. Entire books have been dedicated to French-Canadian fairy tales. They can be whimsical, beautiful, and dark. While the traditional Halloween activities may be unpopular at the moment, there are plenty of spooky tales of ghosts, witches, demons, and devils buried deep in the soil of Canada's history. Raconteurs, the French equivalent of bards or minstrels, would recount fairy tales that lasted several hours or even days to the French Canadians. Similar stories appeared in New Brunswick, demonstrating the mobility of the legends at the time the raconteurs traveled the region. Most of the time, the tales contain symbolic Christian undertones and tales of morality, or superstitions reflective of the culture at the time. One such story is both romantic and unsettling, depending on which version you hear. This myth has many names: the legend of Rose Lulapie, the legend of the devil at the dance, and the legend of the beautiful dancer, and dates back to the 18th century. With its nearly 200 different variations of the legend, it is safe to say there is something for everyone. One version of this, published in 1969 by Gensen, a Catholic priest and folklore scholar, details a young girl where her parents turned away a suitor because he is Christian. They said they would rather the devil than he court their daughter. Soon after, the devil himself appeared at the dance and seduces the daughter, and threatens to whisk her away to hell as his bride. To avoid this, the family turns to the priest for help. He converts the family and marries the daughter to the original suitor, thus thwarting the devil and giving the story a happy ending. Some versions also treat the story as a cautionary tale for young women, portraying the daughter as rebellious and flirtatious. The devil's seduction becomes the metaphor. Converting to Christianity and marrying her original suitor is her settling down and accepting the more traditional domestic values of the time. Some, however, are not even that generous. One alternative telling of the story has a young girl dancing with a stranger at a ball, who at the stroke of midnight reveals himself to be the devil. The young girl is horrified but cannot escape, and the devil kidnaps her and takes her to hell. Many other Quebecians legends include the devil in some capacity, either as a catalyst or a consequence of the story. The devil's involvement can also occur when indigenous stories are combined with settler stories, such as the flying canoe legend, originally a French folktale about a nobleman who would skip mass to go hunting, cursed by God to fly through the night skies being chased by horses and wolves. In the version still told today, a group of courtiers de Boise make a deal with the devil, who bewitches their canoe so it can fly, but they are forbidden to speak the name of God in any way or touch any holy objects. If they do, the devil will take their souls. The ending of this legend goes, after a drunken New Year's Eve party, a group of men almost crash into the church, and in the process they take the Lord's name in vain. Sometimes they manage to escape the devil's punishment, but in this one instance, they are forced to fly the canoe through hell each night and appear in the sky every New Year's Eve. Pretty cool, that one. Let us know in the comments what you think. 4. La Corriveau of Quebec City. On April 15, 1763, Marie Josephette Corriveau, was known as La Corriveau, was condemned to death by the English Army court-martial for murdering her second husband. She was hanged on the plains of Abraham in Quebec City, and her corpse was left exposed in an iron cage for 5 weeks at Point Levy on the south shore of St. Lawrence River. But the information related to her supposed crime and the fate of her body has been weaved into the stuff of legends in the centuries following the tragic story, filled with historical details and fantastic embellishments to create this macabre tale of terror. As a 16-year-old, Marie married Charles Bouchard, her first husband. 11 years later, after the couple had 3 children, Bouchard died. Legend suggests that Marie had killed him by pouring molten lead into his ear. Other versions of this tale say the couple had no children, indicating that it was a very unhappy marriage and tough times. This time to farmer Louis Dodier. It was a troubled marriage fueled by disputes between Dodier and his stepfather, Joseph Corriveau. Rumors soon began to spring up in the community when Dodier was found dead in the stable. Originally reported that he was kicked in the head by a horse, when British doctors later reported that none of the wounds on Dodier's body could have been made by hooves. Marie and her father were arrested. Suspicions of Marie killing her husband with a pitchfork emerged. More shamefully, the legend goes, she let her father take the blame. Marie was to receive 60 lashes and have her hand branded with a capital M for murderer. The night before her father was to be hanged, he received a confession and admitted he had not been the killer. The case was reopened, and Mary was sentenced to hang. Sometimes, the most lurid details are the bureaucratic ones. The British authorities decided not to bury her, but instead put her body in a human-shaped iron cage, or giblet. The cage was placed at the intersection of commonly used roads, presumably as a warning to travelers. Treating her remains so callously certainly disgusted the local population. However, as a convicted murderer, she could not be buried in a cemetery. But, to the frustration of the British, the cage disappeared. La Corriveau had become mobile, cage and all. In the early 1866s, author Philip Albert de Gaspé wrote the folk tale that included a key element. A lone night traveler, Francis Dubuis, hears an unusual noise, which readers recognize as the sound of wind blowing through the cage and the bones of La Corriveau. As night falls, Dubuis takes pity on La Corriveau's soul and recites a prayer for the deceased soul, which is especially important because she was refused last rites by the church. Soon afterwards, in the pitch black, Dubuis cannot see La Corriveau has reached through her cage and is climbing on his back. She needs him to carry her across the St. Lawrence River, where she also wants to celebrate Sabbath with her fellow witches and the will-o-wisps. She needs his help to cross the body of water due to the fact that it is blessed, and she needs help of a good Christian. Dubuis faints, and when he awakens the following day, he assumes his terrifying experience was a dream, until he sees an empty liquor bottle, thinking that she drank the contents. The story of La Corriveau is one of the few Quebecian folk tales whose origins cannot be traced to similar century-old ones in France. The legend is now over 250 years old and still causes emotion in Quebec. It is generally agreed that La Corriveau was a victim of spousal abuse and could not have received a fair trial. Movies and plays have been written about her, and dozens of books, and every so often her cage reappears as a temporary exhibit in Quebec City, only to then disappear. 5. New Brunswick's Haunted Hotel. Grand hotels are a particular topic of fashion for urban legend enthusiasts. The abundant cavernous spaces have plenty of dark corners for apparitions to hide, and their usual historic standing means they've likely seen guests pass away. One Canadian hotel stands out as the ultimate haunted spot. So much that they acknowledge their ghosts in the history section of their website. The Algonquin Resort has been open for over a century, and just by looking at it screams haunted. The pointed red roofs like castle turrets and the white and black Tudor facade are imposing, the perfect recipe for housing all sorts of things that go bump in the night. When it was built in the 1800s, it was one of a string of elegant hotels popping up around the country. New Brunswick, one of the hotel's first advertising slogans, was an incomparable resting place. They probably didn't mean for people to take it so far, though. While the ghosts of the staff may stay out of a sense of duty to their job, the stories of the guests are much darker. Unlike the Overlook Hotel, which was the hotel featured in the famous book by Stephen King, The Shining, nothing horrific happened at the Algonquin. Some tragic events occurred, such as a fire in 1914 that almost destroyed the entirety of the original wooden structure. But somehow, the blaze spared the painter and the kitchen wings, and now the iconic tower where mysterious lights are seen flashing. The figure of a ghostly woman in a white dress also makes an appearance in the tower's windows from time to time. Most of the ghosts wandering the hotel's hallways were not murdered or unhappy. Instead, they enjoyed the hotel so much that they wanted to extend their stay permanently. One of the most famous Algonquin ghosts is a bellboy who shows people to their rooms and tells them about the property, only to evaporate before he can accept his tip. Guests are encouraged to leave a small gratuity for him on the bell desk so he can collect it the next time he appears. A night watchman can be heard making rounds, keeping the hotel safe even in the afterlife. People know it's him by the sound of his footsteps, pacing, and keys jingling. Another sighting is of an apparition of a senior staff woman setting and rearranging the tables in the dining room. While the ghosts of the staff may stay out of a duty to their job, the stories of the guests are much darker. A phantom bride who is said to live in room 473 can be heard weeping. Many have speculated the cause. The saddest of the theories is her fiancé, unable to make their wedding day. She died of a broken heart or worse. When the guests claim to never want to leave, we take them seriously, reads a line in the Algonquin's history. There's also the story of a child who chased a ball out the third-floor window and can now be seen and heard playing with his ball in the halls. The ghostly repertoire of the hotel is extensive, with disturbances reported in rooms 308, 373, objects temporarily disappearing on the fourth floor, doorknobs that turn by themselves on the second floor, and the staff receiving phone calls from dead lines in empty rooms. Despite the tragic origins of some of the supernatural guests and the hijinks, the hotel assures us that all of the spirits are friendly. The hotel offers daily tours of the haunted areas. They tell tales of the guests that never wanted to leave and ever dutiful employees that loved their job so much they continued it after death. They recount the countless run-ins with guests and staff alike over the years of the hotel that have never been operational. None overly harmful or dangerous. As it turns out, even Canadian ghosts are renowned for being respectful and kind. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. Please remember, like, comment, and subscribe. You'll really help my channel out. And until next time, good night.